welcome to Game Arena's 5-inch floppy. I'm Junglist. The mainstream media has been going nuts over video game addiction yet again, and the gaming industry has rallied and cried foul and debunked, as we usually do. Preaching to our own choirs, yes, but we do it well. And let's face it, these people are easy to debunk. They give anecdotal evidence of one kid who can't stop playing, and there's the usual obligatory PhD media princess comparing game addiction to drug addiction. But what if we're, in our rabid defense of defending gaming as a legitimate entertainment form, only half right? Hear me out, hear me out. Gaming is entertainment. No one's shoving a pill down their throat or a needle in their arm, and no one's forking out $16 to destroy their lungs. So there's no physical addiction. There's nothing physical about gaming, unless you're playing Res. But what if drug addiction is just the wrong comparison to make? I mean, there is such a thing as behavioral addiction. To better understand this, we're going to have to leave the comfortable confines of our review studio and get a professional opinion. This is Rebecca Stone, a psychologist specializing in addiction, who has actually treated cases involving video games. So what's the professional verdict? Is video game addiction actually a thing?
In the new DSM-5 that's coming out, there has been a lot of talk about whether or not to include something like gaming addiction in that manual. At the moment, the only behavioural addiction that they're considering including is gambling addiction, simply because there's not enough research really to support the other kind of addictive behaviours. So people define the difference between substance abuse and addiction as being the body's dependency on the substance. So with drugs and alcohol, the body reaches a point where it's unable to cope without that substance, and it leads people to have to increase their dosage of the substance in order to get the same achieved effect. Then there's also the withdrawal element as well. So if people try and withdraw from the substance, there's great issues for the body. So it has a lot of impact on things like sleep, on mental health. People can get quite sick, nauseous effects, headaches. So there is a strong dependency there. Whereas a compulsion is more a need to do something or want to do something. So it becomes out of hand. So when it sort of goes from being just overuse to a compulsion is when a person is unable to stop themselves from doing the behaviour or doing the act. So it becomes less about getting pleasure from the act anymore and more about just that constant drive, psychological drive to complete the behaviour. There often can be withdrawals from gaming. People can often suffer from depression if they stop or they're separated from the game. So the industry is a little bit divided. Some people feel that yes, it actually is a genuine problem, and other people feel that no, it's more of an overuse or a compulsion, but not an actual physical or biological addiction.
The psychology industry isn't the only one that's divided. At the recent game conference at Macquarie University in Sydney, we spoke to a few respected figures, including ludologist Espen Arseth, who believes game companies shouldn't be called out for creating engrossing experiences.
So only in the cases where people actually do want to stop playing and they can't, we could talk about a real addiction. The current research suggests that that's a very small minority of gamers that might be in trouble in that way, and that small minority is perhaps it's 1–2%, and 1–2% of a population are the people who would have some sort of significant psychological problem anyway. So whether it's the games that have caused it or whether they are just people in trouble who happen to play a lot of games, it's difficult to say.
Well, Rebecca, is that true?
People who have mental illnesses can be more susceptible to to addictions, and vice versa as well, that addictions can lead to mental illness. But yeah, certainly people who may be in more vulnerable states, so people who are maybe more socially awkward or having problems at school, having problems in their work life, people who may be a little bit more withdrawn, it can be quite conducive to them.
Also at the game conference was respected game thinker Ian Bogost, who applied his usual broad thinking approach.
The second thing is, what are we doing to the people to which we are giving these games that we're making? And are we asking them to participate in a kind of pattern of activity that may or may not be destructive, self-destructive? And it doesn't really matter whether or not it's kind of clinically destructive to me. It's more a matter of, is this the sort of world that we want to live in? One in which we click a button on a mouse every few minutes, hours, whatever, and then we come back again several hours later and do it because we're worried about losing our crops in Farmville or something. For me personally, that's not a desirable experience to create. For others, they don't even ask that question. It's like, well, this is the trend, this is the thing, this is what's hot. If we don't do this, we're gonna miss out, we're gonna lose out.
Not all designers are blind to what's happening though. The godfather of gaming himself, Shigeru Miyamoto, has said he'll never use what he calls carrot on a stick mechanics. Designers like David Sirlin have spoken out against these types of games, as well as indie poster boy and Braid creator Jonathan Blow, who calls them unethical. Unethical is a strong word, so what exactly are they opposed to? RPGs and MMOs typically have a small chance of great reward with every action. With every attack, there's a chance for a crit. With every swing of the mining axe, there's a chance for a gem. The random element means you don't want to stop because each new action could be the one with something big. There's also guaranteed rewards strategically spaced out. From what we know of behavioral psychology, people are happy to do an ever-increasing amount of work to get the same reward over and over. And care is taken so you're always almost about to get a new weapon, and when you do, almost about to get a new ability, or unlock a new color of G-string or whatever other non-tangible thing we give value to in our heads. And all this is tied together with aesthetic rewards like the golden pillar of leveling up or the sounds of completing a quest. These come quick at first and then spread out, but by the end of your play cycle, your brain has actually associated the boring activity of grinding with the reward at the end. To you, they're one and the same.
Who's a good little doggy? Who's a good little brainwashed doggy? Yes, you are. Yes, you heard the bell. You want your food.
So, every action having a small chance of great reward, intermittent rewards, and an association of repetitive activities with bleeps and bloops. Sound like any other addiction you can think of? Yes, gambling addiction is the comparison mainstream media has been missing out on all this time, a bona fide behavioral addiction. And not just in the sense that you can get addicted to anything like exercise, or reading, or chocolate.
Comparing the parallels to gambling, it's definitely very similar in terms of that reward structure. So it kind of reinforces the addictive behaviour. Certain endorphins are released when a person is gambling. So, I mean, again, that could be applied to gaming addiction as well, that there is some level of chemistry there. So there's that constant need for the gratification that is so common in behavioural addiction, and as you level up it gets more and more spread out, so kind of hooks you in at the start of the game because the reward is fairly instantaneous, but as you go on you need to keep playing more and more and more in order to achieve the same reward. So yeah, in that sense it is very similar to gambling, and given that there is such a close parallel, you could say that it is crossing an ethical line, especially if they've got psychologists and staff that are aware of this.
So, game companies are using similar techniques to pokey machines to hook us. In fact, some go further by giving you something to lose. Games like Farmville, you've already invested the time, effort, and headspace into your farm, therefore it has value. But the game will actually reduce your status if you don't continually log in and upkeep. Still, how can something purely visual and auditory create this powerful an urge in us? To understand that, we have to understand what fun actually is. Everything we do in life is to satisfy compulsions that have evolved ever since our ancestors were cavemen. Some of them